Yeah, welcome everyone to the webinar, and we will be focusing on sort of cost reduction in cloud. And we've got a few parts to this, so it's gonna start with myself just doing some background around cost in the cloud and some of the impacts that's having and things, and then be handed over to Siam, who'll be presenting a more in-depth view into ways that you can reduce your cloud spend, different techniques, different tools, and things like that. And then finally, Dinesh will join on part 3, and we'll talk a little bit about what Civo is doing around sort of cost reduction as well, but also in terms of our technology. And then I'll just do a short summary at the end before we go into a Q&A. And before we get started, it's just worth mentioning, it's been our one plug probably throughout the webinar, but we are holding a tech conference in Tampa in Florida on the 7th and 8th of February. We've got some amazing speakers, including Steve Wozniak as our keynote, but there's 50 other speakers, there's 10 workshops. The focus is on innovation and education. And yeah, we've got all the food and beverages included, but we're doing a special offer for anyone on this webinar. If you did want to join that, I appreciate there's lots of people from all around the world here. Maybe not all of you will be able to get to Florida, but I can tell you it's very sunny in February. So if it's cold where you are, then it could be a mix with a nice vacation as well. But there's a code there, Meetup50, that will give you a $50 ticket. Usually it's $400. So quite a reduction there if you did want to join that event. But yeah, getting into the core of what everyone's here for today. As you already know, I'm Mark. I'm the CEO of Civo, and Civo is a cloud provider focused on cloud native technologies such as Kubernetes. And just a little bit about my background. I've been in the technology industry for over 20 years now, and my original background was in kind of shared web hosting and domain names, and I actually founded the 5th largest hosting company in the UK, and that was actually sold in 2019. But since then, my focus is on building Civo, and that's been set up as a global cloud computing provider, and that's really where all of my focus and the team's focus is going on building Civo and our technologies. It's quite, before I get started on this, I know there's a graphic on the screen now around the kind of economic outlook, which sounds a bit doom and gloom. I thought what was interesting, and we had over 300 people registered for this webinar, and I think that really demonstrates there's a lot of interest in this area in reducing cloud spend at the moment. So it's a very topical area at the moment, and I think even going back to when we were in October, we were actually exhibiting in Detroit at KubeCon, and it was pretty much the main theme as well at KubeCon. There were so many people talking about cost reduction, so it's certainly on everyone's mind at the moment. And I think the obvious reason is the current economic climate, and you can see from this graphic that in 2023 the global economy is not growing at the rate it has been. It is slowing down. Advanced economies, like the US, like much of Europe, are really starting to slow down, with only 1.1% growth predicted for 2023, and even emerging markets are stagnating as well in that respect. So obviously, I'm sure everyone's aware of cost reductions that are happening within companies and layoffs in technology sectors and things like that. And I think now in 2023, companies are really trying to look at other costs as well. And things like cloud have become, a big item on a lot of companies' accounts that are looking to reduce. So just moving on to, we obviously all know there's lots of cloud providers out there, and I'm sure many on this webinar are already using one of the providers on the screen, and but it is a difficult decision to make for a lot of companies, and it is every provider has its pros and cons. There's many factors that sort of play into why you might select one provider over another. But really today we're going to focus on cost, specifically on that, and talk about some of the, especially now diving into some of the principles that you can apply to reduce your cloud spend amongst all of these providers, not just picking out a single provider, and that includes Civo in that as well. Just to set the scene, it's worth a graphic on the next graphic that you're going to see. Talks about the cloud market in general, and this was a study done by Statista back in Q2 2022, and this really looks at the total cloud spend, and it's around about 200 billion market now, and you can see that Amazon has the lion's share of that, with 34% cloud spend with Amazon, and sort of fairly closely followed by Azure and Google. So there's probably no surprises there. But overall, that's 65% of market share with the big three providers. And out of the 8 providers on that graphic, I believe it's 82% market share within those providers. So I think that's what's interesting from that, is that it kind of, with so much spend with so few providers, if there is price sensitivity, if there are price rises and things, and not just looking at price, if we're looking at service quality and we're looking at outages and things like that, to have so much with so few does pose certain risks for businesses as well. So it's just worth thinking about that in the grand scheme of things. I'm just verifying those facts there. If we move on, I think what's interesting is there's a huge amount of press at the moment as well. If we just go back one slide. Oh, going back, there we go. Yeah, on this graphic, there's a huge amount of press at the moment in terms of price increases and price sensitivity within cloud. And I've just put on screen a few examples. Already there's been some quite large price increases in 2022. Google introduced a wave of price increases in October 2022. DigitalOcean increased their prices by 20% last year. Now, Microsoft have just announced a 9% increase on prices in the UK. And there's a lot of predictions around further price increases to come in 2023. And some of those are, more kind of could be devastating predictions, could be as much as 30% in Europe and 20% in the US over the next year. So it's quite scary with all the inflation that's going on, the energy crisis that's driving costs within data centers, and chips that are becoming harder to get hold of and more expensive as well, playing into all these factors that are driving cost increase. So again, it's becoming such an important time to really look at ways to review your costs and reduce those costs. And Civo, we actually conducted a survey of 100 companies. This was sort of middle of last year, where we surveyed companies that used hyperscale providers, and they were companies of all sizes that we surveyed. And 45% of them indicated that they were under growing pressure to reduce their cloud costs. And 37% actually said that they'd receive unexpected bills from their cloud provider in the last 12 months. And then 34% felt locked into their current cloud provider. And by that last stat as well, you can see 65% of people said it was too expensive for them to actually leave their cloud provider because of things like high egress charges that I'm sure a lot of people are aware of, and has been well documented in the press in particular. And I even know that there's quite regulatory pressure now in various different countries about cloud lock-in and not charging egress fees to stop people leaving cloud providers. So it's quite a topical subject at the moment, and I think over the next year or two there could be some interesting developments from regulatory bodies that are trying to ban some of these practices of stopping people to leave. And I think one thing that's always certainly close to my heart, Civo, we're not a hyperscaler, but we're sometimes we like to think ourselves as a hyperscaler shaker, that we're trying to shake up the market and challenge that status quo. But not just Civo, there are other providers out there that are trying to do things differently, are provoking the kind of pricing models that are out there already, and trying to make change of an industry that is dominated by very few companies. And I think that's only a good thing, to have that choice and create some competition for some of the big providers, that even if it actually means that they have to change some of their pricing models and reduce costs, that can only be a good thing for the industry. But I think one of the things that when we looked at Civo and what we do, and we did a survey around this, we actually surveyed in the same survey I mentioned before, how many services companies were using within the cloud. And interestingly, 80% of respondents said they used less than 15 services. And when you look at companies like AWS that maybe offer hundreds of different products, it's quite surprising that most companies don't actually use that amount of services. And only 34% of companies use less than 5 services. So it's only really 20% we're saying that use more than 15 services in a provider like AWS. So I think there's the common misbelief sometimes that you have to be with a hyperscaler because you need access to all these services. But in reality, lots of smaller and medium-sized businesses are probably better served with a smaller provider that's a lot more focused on their core services and offers a more predictable bill, no egress charges, the complexity is reduced in the process, efficiency can improve with a better developer experience, a simpler experience. And it's been, again, well documented that how complex some of these hyperscalers can be. And as well as things like enterprise support, it's quite often included with smaller providers and enhanced SLAs in certain areas. So I think, one thing I'd like people to think about is that, you don't always have to be with a hyperscaler to get a good level of service. And is it right to be spending almost a premium to be with a hyperscaler when there's other providers out there that can provide an equivalent or better service? And last slide before I hand over to Saiyam is it's worth thinking about a multi-cloud approach. And I don't always believe it should be a one-size-fits-all approach. And there's certain risks, as I highlighted, that if you do go for a one-size-fits-all approach, there are different providers out there. There are different providers that have their pros and cons. Some might be very focused on performance. Some might be more focused on cost. Some might be focused on high security environments or data sovereignty and things like that. So I think it's sometimes worth thinking about different workloads that you might run within your organization and how they might be better suited to having a varied multi-cloud approach. And, should you put certain environments with, a cost-effective provider versus a hyperscale provider and things like that. So it's always worth thinking about that. And in bigger companies, obviously, there's lots of different departments sometimes. And again, they may have different needs and different cloud providers may suit those changing needs. And I think there's a real cost efficiency to be gained through that multi-cloud approach. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Saiyam, but you will hear from me again at the end. But I'll hand over to you, Saiyam.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. And let me share the screen. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Saiyam Pathak, and I'm working as Director of Technical Evangelism at Civo. And previously, I have worked with HP, Walmart, Oracle, and a bunch of cloud native stuff, machine learning stuff on Kubernetes, machine learning platform on Kubernetes. So I have been in the space. And as mentioned by Mark, the recent economy stuff which is going on around the globe has is one of the factors that have triggered this discussion on, cloud native cost reduction, which is there. But there's also the other angle to it, which is, which also Mark touched upon, the vendor lock-in stuff. So people, as they get into the cloud providers, and then there are hidden charges that lead to sudden bills, and you get surprises. And as startups and even medium-sized organization, it's very difficult to just wake up and see $100,000 of bills where you don't even know what went wrong, and something didn't get turned off. So yeah, let's try to simplify some of the things, some of the practices that can be used across all the clouds, some of the toolings that can be used, and how specifically for Kubernetes we can check the costs, and what is the right mindset to do that. So the thing here is, I'll like to introduce a term called FinOps. And it's very kind of building term at the moment. So we all have different definitions of DevOps by now, and it's well in the culture now. We have been pushing the culture of DevOps because it's the responsibility of the teams to understand the processes, to work in a collaborative manner. So that is where FinOps comes in. So it is an evolving cloud financial management discipline and cultural practice that enables organization to get maximum business value by helping engineering, finance, technology, business teams to collaborate on data-driven decisions. Now, what does that mean actually? So the thing here is, it is also a culture-driven process that has to be, like people have to be educated on that. And that is where you will be seeing a lot of, blogs and videos and stuff around cost saving. A lot of companies are coming up in the cloud cost optimization, cloud cost saving scenario, because it has to be a team's responsibility. So you can see it's a shared responsibility between different teams. Not only the CFO needs to know what has to deal with the finances, it actually has to go down to the engineering and the ops team as well. So it is team based. And when we go next, we can see, so when you are working in an organization, obviously you are part of a certain team, and you are working as part of a certain project, and you are building that project is deployed and using certain resources. The meter is ticking. So whatever you are doing is actually cost to company. Whatever resources that you are provisioning, whether it's a small compute or attached volume that you're using, it's a cost to company. So there is a team cost, how much a particular team is spending on a particular project. And that's not responsibility of the CFOs or the higher executives to have a check on. So that is where everybody needs to have a certain set of education. Just like when we join a particular company, we have a set of trainings that we need to do. So in a similar manner, there has to be certain set of training with respect to FinOps as well, where people need to be aware that these are the set budgets, or at least the team leads, they can give their team members certain insights on, this is the budgeting per team which is allocated, per cost center which is allocated, certain terms that is being used in the organization. So this is what the project has to be budgeted for. And then when you grow, so you grow gradually. So there's no certain spike. Because if you do not monitor anything and you say you are starting small, everything is good, your budgets are fine, you are way under the limit, you don't need to monitor, you don't need to have this discussion now. And when you have the bills, then you need to have the discussion. Even then you can, what can be done is, and what should be the best practice is that you start analyzing your costs so that you don't see a certain spike. Because if you wait for that certain spike, then it's a reduction, then it becomes an order that you have to reduce the cost. But if you are doing it gradually, putting out new features, telling this is what I'm doing, I need a GPU, I'm doing some training, then I need to go for another volume, I need to go for another instance, I need to go for another database as per the scaling, as per the records, as per the metrics, then definitely your cost will be justified. So as engineers, definitely you would be knowing as per the request, the number of flow of traffic that comes in, you will be able to judge and you'll be able to give that metric, or you will be able to at least write certain metrics for your application so that you have those metrics, and based on those metrics, you can predict some of the costing which is there, and you can give it. So overall, as an executive, they will be just having a clear picture of which team is using which cost and how it is justified. So that can be an ongoing process from extreme low level to the extreme high level. Low in the sense where you are directly working on the project, and high in the sense where you are just viewing the dashboards which are relevant to business, relevant to revenue generation. So those set of metrics. Now, some parameters to watch out for. These are the most common parameters that can be applied or used across all the cloud vendors, because all cloud vendors have compute, network, storage, and Kubernetes. So whenever you delete a compute, the volume can stay. So it is not mandatory that the volume, gets off. So it can stay. And you or a new fresher, if they are not trained properly, they might not be able to, see that particular volume running, and that is incurring the bill again and again every month on month. And suddenly when there is a bill and you have a question, so you have that 12-month of a year or two, whatever it is, so you have that huge bill for that same volume which you forgot to delete because you didn't even know that. So those are certain things that need some eyes on. Then you need to use some of the tooling provided by the cloud provider. So some of the cloud providers, the big three, they have their own cost optimizers. So cost optimizer gives you a good view of, what your costings are for each particular service, how you can optimize this cost. Then each of them have their own recommender system that gives you recommendations based on your usage pattern. If you have enabled that, if you have enough logs, if you have enough monitoring, then you should be able to see that particular usage, and you should be able to fine tune those. So same, the recommender is for Google as well. New instance types. So whenever there's a new instance types, it comes with a better performance, like the Graviton one. It comes with, certain set of enhancements. So you need always have an eye on the new instance types which are there. For network, every IP address is chargeable. So whenever you just delete anything, or you have anything reserved as an IP address, you are always getting charged for it. So you always need to monitor the IP addresses which are not attached, but which are attached to your account, because you are getting billed for that. Data transfer is one of the most interesting thing that people get billed for, and they don't even get to know what things are happening cross cloud, cross region. This is very important to know. The data transfer cost per cloud is there. So if you are, transferring, you are communicating between different services across clouds or across different regions, there are different set of data transfers that gets applied, and they are chargeable. And when you transfer massive data, like, thousands of GBs or a few terabytes of data, within few terabytes of data only, you will be able to see huge monthly cost increase in that. So that is very significant hidden cost, which they do not even mention in their pricing calculators. NAT gateways, again, if they are not used, so they'll be chargeable. Coming to storage, make sure that, now this is from the Kubernetes perspective. So the first one, there are no attached PVs, unattached PVs. So whenever you create a persistent volume, it is backed up by maybe EBS or maybe some other volume, maybe a GCE persistent disk. So if you delete that, it's not necessary that the PV goes away. So it will keep on getting you charged. Extra volumes provisioned, whether for compute or whether for any other service. If you have extra volumes, you need to have a sanity check on that and make sure you don't have extra volumes which are just sitting there doing nothing, and you have to delete those. Right size volume for the right size workloads. Now this again comes to some level of efforts from the engineering that has to be done on getting the metrics, getting the data, and then picking right size volumes for the right size workloads. Snapshots are interesting one, because many people enable snapshots, then they forget, but snapshot keeps on getting added. If you do not have a retention policy, like, delete after certain days, then it will keep on getting added. Same is for the log retention. Most of the services on the big three, they have their managed logging service and the managed monitoring service, and they are automatically switched on whenever you create some services. So you have to make sure how much log data you are gathering in your managed log services, because when you talk about Kubernetes, there is a lot of metrics that keeps on getting generated, and if you keep everything, then probably, or if you don't have proper log rotation, like for certain metrics you just need 1 day data, for certain metrics you just need 2 days data, then probably your workload cost will be less than what you are getting charged for the logs and the monitoring. So make sure you have a check on that. Coming to Kubernetes, which we'll discuss in detail as well. Kubernetes is obviously complex beast, but we can have, resource utilization is something which is very critical when it comes to Kubernetes. How much number of nodes cluster that you have created for running a WordPress site. So you need to have that sort of analogy of what workload you are running on Kubernetes and how much memory and CPU size nodes and the number that you have incurred, because most of the cloud vendors, especially the big three, they have the control plane charges as well. So basically what that means is, even if you do not run any of the nodes or any of the workloads, you will still being charged a lot because of the control plane charge, then the nodes that are there, then the disks that are attached to the particular nodes. Autoscaler, that is very good and very good feature provided by almost all the cloud vendors and natively within Kubernetes. So within Kubernetes, you have the HPA and the VPA, horizontal pod autoscaler and the vertical pod autoscaler, that can be used within your application. And then there is cluster autoscaler, which is cloud vendor specific, which is in the official GitHub repository of Kubernetes, but it is basically scaling of the nodes whenever you are running out of the nodes. So you should always be intelligently using and fine-tuning the autoscalers to be used. Then incoming request trend, again coming to the metrics, there are a lot of metrics is there, but what is the right metrics? So you need to have the traffic ingestion, what sort of traffic is coming, note down the patterns for that, and then intelligently fine-tune the autoscalers. This tasks, if not done right, and if your company scales exponentially, your bills will also scale exponentially. It happens, it has happened, it will happen, and it will happen after as well if you do not care about these things. Again, right sizing of resources. Now, why Kubernetes is complex in terms of monitoring the cost or in terms of cutting the cost is because there is an additional layer of abstraction on your instance. So cloud providers has their node pricing, which is there. So you are charged X amount of dollars for a particular node, but for your workloads, because now everything is getting shifted to Kubernetes, everything is getting shifted towards the running applications in Kubernetes. So you have your machine learning engineers running machine learning platforms on Kubernetes. You have your all the workloads which are running, and even internal teams, there are internal Kubernetes platforms, and other people are given separate Kubernetes cluster to deploy their applications. So how do you monitor those? Because that is where you need the metrics which matters the most. Which application, which environment, dev, test, stage, prod, is costing you more, which namespace is costing you more, because is your monitoring namespace costing you more than your application namespace? Is your Kubernetes resources, kube system, and other namespaces costing you more than your actual application namespace? These are the key metrics that you need to take out, and these are easy, these are not difficult, because you have metric server, you have Prometheus, you have various monitoring tools that can help you give that information. So when you have that metrics, obviously you can use those metrics for auto scaling, predictive auto scaling. So there is there are certain projects. One of them is intelligent horizontal pod autoscaler. I will link the GitHub repository somewhere after this, but it can help you with the predictive auto scaling as well. And when you have that trends, when you have that the prediction, then you will be able to scale well. And obviously coming with the chat GPT thing, which is going viral, I'm pretty sure we'll be having more and more intelligent AI tools that can help with predictive auto scaling, that can monitor your trends and the Kubernetes and give you predictions based on notifications on how to scale or or scale that. And then namespace resource budgeting. So Kubernetes has concept of namespaces, and you can allocate resources per namespace. So you can have, for new joiners, or basically a separate namespace for everything. And then budgeting on separate namespaces is a good practice, like resource budgeting on separate namespaces. Sometimes it becomes tricky because you are not aware, but over time, when you become habitual of doing it, you keep on doing it as a habit, you'll be able to predict well. It's same that people used to do with the task that you are given when you are developing something. So at first it becomes, whenever a feature is given to you, it becomes difficult to tell, it will take 10 days to build this or 11 days to build it. But eventually, when you keep on doing this practice, there will come a stage when someone gives you a task and you'll be actually able to tell, yeah, this can be completed in 4 days, because you have done that practice. So always, right size your resources is something which is very important, and resource budgeting is important. Now, to help with this, some more recommendations before we move to the demos. So AWS Cost Explorer, budget allocations per project. Most of the cloud vendors have their billing stuff where you can set budget alerts, billing alerts. So make sure you set that monthly budget, so that if by chance anything goes wrong, you at least have an alert that your spend is going beyond this particular limit. Make sure that your logs and metrics data does not overpopulate. And this will soon be a practice, that company policy training as part of FinOps, that people are educated more on the cost, and it's not only the finance team that is taking care of the finances. And obviously it's not you who is be taking care of the finance, but it's just bridging the gap. You have some knowledge of where all you can contribute towards the cost reduction for the company, or at least if not in the reduction, but at least where you are spending the cost with respect to the applications that you are running. Certain tools are there. Now we are coming specifically to Kubernetes. There are certain tools which can help you in monitoring different Kubernetes cluster, or right sizing different Kubernetes cluster, giving you recommendation, having a good view, tagging of your resources. Because as Mark mentioned, multi-cloud is not something that is new. It's actually happening. Like, people are going multi-cloud. Multi-cloud is out of the need, because every cloud vendor, especially the smaller ones, have their expertise in the services that they are bringing. And when you talk about the big three, they have like hundreds of services which are there. So it's actually the same. So if you see that team size working on one particular service would be kind of same with the team size that is working on a company in a startup, because and they are working more intelligently with the new tools, with the community support, to build that to perfection, and using the right set of tooling. So I think multi-cloud is something which is happening and will continue to grow, to get the best from all the clouds that you need in terms of the services with respect to your application. So certain projects, open cost. So open cost model was given by Kubecost. So Kubecost actually uses open cost model to give fancy dashboarding and stuff, which we'll definitely see. Coco is another one. OptScale is interesting because it's complete platform, open source platform, and it gives you the intelligent dashboards, predictions and all that stuff out of the box. So it is something worth a try. A newer one in the game is Komiser, which we also recently got to know because they integrated Civo as one of their cloud providers as well. So Komiser also is something which you can try that out. So let's see some of these in action. So first I have Komiser, which is already running Civo. So you can see, I do a bunch of POCs. So I have around 292 resources. So Mark, I will do the cleanup later on. But yeah, I am spending some around 1.8K because I have so many resources. So now this is the thing, right? I know that I don't need all the resources, but if I do not keep a check, or if I do not do a sanity check, or if my managers, or if the team does not do the sanity check, then the bills will keep on growing. Now Now here the bill doesn't grow, because it is in-house and it is used for Civo. So here interesting thing is, so you have the cloud and you can add multiple cloud vendors in the config file, which I'll show you. And then you can filter everything. So let's see. So first you can select some of your resources and add tags. I have already added some of the tags like project, Cube, ADM and stuff like that. So I can filter by cloud provider, which is Civo currently. I can filter by cloud region. So we have, New York. So apply filter. So it will show on me all the resources in the New York region. And then I can filter by service. So I will know like how many Kubernetes clusters are there, or how many, compute instances are there. And then the monthly cost for them, which are getting there based on the certain sizing that I have created the clusters with. But at least I know now. And then I will be able to even filter by specific tags like, project is Cube ADM. So it will give me, and I'll remove maybe Kubernetes one. Yeah. So you can see we have tags on this. So these 3 computes are tagged here. So this is where it helps. It gives you a unified view of your resources which are there. You can download, you can save them as view, save them as reports and stuff. And you can also give them specific tags so that you know which particular project is spending how much. Now, this is overall cloud resources. Coming to Kubernetes, based on the open cost model, it gives you deep insights into your Kubernetes cluster. So this is Kubecost, and this is the GKE cluster, which is, inserted into it. So you can see for 2 days. So I ran it for just for 2 days, and you can see a per day cost. So there is one cluster per day cost. And I think for these 2 days itself, it is around $7.25. Now we can see the cost by per namespace. And this is where it gets interesting, because I will be able to see what cost is there for per namespace that we are spending. So we can see default and kube system. I have one application that I have deployed in default. So, okay, my application is taking $4, but other resources like kube system itself is taking $2. And this is, just for 2 days. It's not the monthly cost which is there. So that is where you need to keep an eye on the resource, your application usage, and then what all things are getting deployed onto your cluster, because you cannot be running a cluster and having just a small application and rest of the cost is being managed by a cost is being incurred by all the other resources which are running in your cluster. And then you have very interesting things, which is allocation. So you can see how much CPU, GPU, RAM, persistent volume, network, load balancer, each of the cost that are segregated. And we are also, working with them to have the proper integration with Civo. They have right now only with the big 3. Again, as Mark mentioned, due to the cloud, budget that they allocate, the billions of dollars that the share market they hold in the cloud native space. So then you have assets. So you can filter by assets. You can filter like how much, what all things are there that you are getting charged. So I told you cluster management is the control plane fee. Then you have charged for the nodes. There is one load balancer that I'm being charged for. And then there are disks that I'm being charged for. And then is the very interesting part, which is savings. So it gives you a very good insight from your cluster. Basically, it deploys Prometheus metric server on your cluster, gather those metrics, and gives you, these insights based on the usage that you are having. So you can see it is abandoned workloads and it is over provisioned of the containers. So if I actually click on that, it will see the number of the requested amount of CPU is this much, but the actual usage is this much. And for CPU, the gap is very big, like it's more than 2, the gap which is there. So there is something that needs to be done. So you can see estimated savings per month that will be done if I reduce the size of this particular deployment. Yeah, I deployed this. I don't know how much I'll be using it. So definitely I can, just click and apply those remedies. And also we can set up the auto remediations. So this is very interesting. And you can pick a lot of savings like Kubernetes in managed underutilized nodes, reserve instances, whether it recommends you to use some of the reserved instances, local disk, right size your cluster nodes. So like this, it says that you can actually save around $60-70 a month on just a single Kubernetes cluster, which is there. And then you can export reports, you can create advanced reports, you can edit the report, and you can give custom fields, and you can export that, send it wherever you want to do. And you can have budgeting, alerting, give your Slack webhook over there, and you'll be getting the alerts. This particular portion is free. The only thing that becomes paid is when you want to add multiple providers. So obviously, Kubecost is there to make the business, but it is based on the open cost model. Open cost model is open source, and this particular single cluster view or multiple cluster views, single cluster views is free. And when you want to add multiple clusters, it will be chargeable as per whatever planning that they have. I don't know, but I found it very fancy. So you can have a look at that. And another thing would like to add, so this is where Civo is in. So you can say possible savings for us is coming out only to be $4, because we are already on the cheaper side of cloud native things. And you can see the allocations, the RAM, how much it is being charged. So total, we are charged only $2 for 2 days, more than 2 days. How this is coming, because if I go to settings, I can actually add custom pricing. So I have enabled custom pricing, and then I have added specific pricing. Obviously, we cannot add detailed custom pricing. That is why we'll be working with them to have, kind of working with our billing APIs and creating that custom model. But in general, if you have a bare metal instance and things like that, and if you know the costing, you can actually add all those costs, and it will also start appearing on your, the cost breakdowns and all these things. So yeah, those are some of the fancy tools. Use them. At least it will give you some information on how to get view of all the cloud resources, then how to go inside Kubernetes and get all the resources. And then it will also give you a breakdown on what exactly you need to take care, the metrics. And it is better to start now than late, irrespective what your cloud spends are today. So that's the only thing. I hope you got something out of this, some recommendations, some things that you think you will be applying. So yeah, that's pretty much it from my side. And over to you, Dinesh, for stuff that Civo is doing, and how just by using Civo, you can eliminate most of the recommendations that I told.
Yeah, thank you very much, Saiyam. So a little introduction about me. I'm Dinesh. I'm CTO at Civo. Past lives, I've been CTO for a cybersecurity company and for a data center company. So I've got a lot of experience in this area of building clouds and building technologies that are deployed to the clouds. And Civo is something that has been a real passion for the last 2-3 years now, that I've been working and building this cloud from the ground up. And one of the things we really want to do is challenge what this narrative is at the moment, especially around costs. There's been a huge shift now, as we've covered, on saving money and putting in new things, getting your staff to get involved all the way from almost board level down to developer level. And these things take a lot of time to do. There are culture changes that you have to put in place. And I generally feel this is because cloud hasn't delivered what it was promised to do, which was give you agile workloads that you could move around in a really cost-effective environment. And a lot of conversations I'm having with people at the moment are around, why is cloud so expensive? And I think some of the things we've covered with egress charges that you're getting charged for, and hidden things, and the inability to get easy visibility of what you're running, makes it really easy for these costs to spiral out of control. And that's something with Civo that we're really, really focused on bucking the trend for, and really challenging that what hyperscalers are doing is all about. One of the ways we're doing that is, when we started off, we were really focused just on the core set of products and delivering cloud native technologies, which is why we're classed as a cloud native, the only cloud native service provider out at the moment, because all of our focus is on delivering what we believe cloud should be, which is this agile environment where you can move your workloads really efficiently, really easily, have your developers work with the platform and work with solutions to deliver business value at the end of the day. And that's what we're really, really focused on. As we've covered, kind of what we believed before the survey, but you don't need all of these hundreds of technologies, hundreds of buttons to click to build a product today. And you only need a core set. which is what we've really focused on. And I think we're getting really good feedback from developers as well, that with our focus around that, it's just a nice platform to use, and it's really nice to hear that. One of the things as well, obviously, Siam's touched on briefly, but we're a lot cheaper from day one. And one of the things we're able to do is we don't try and lock you in with a big cloud spend to start getting discounts. So you go to some other providers, and if you spend 3 years and you pay up front for that 3 year, you'll suddenly start getting 40-50% discounts. And we just don't think that's an easy way for you to predict how your business is going to grow and how you can support your business. So our pricing is low up front because almost those discounts are locked in for everyone from as soon as you come on board with Civo. Now, some people might think, right, we'll there's a, sorry if you can go back now, that there's a balance between that, between price and performance. So we're obviously sacrificing somewhere, but as I mentioned, we're really focused on delivering Kubernetes products and delivering a managed Kubernetes product and really focusing on that, which means that our launch times are 60 seconds from the point that you click get going to having a cluster there ready to go. And during some recent storage benchmarks, we can be up to 10 times faster on delivering that performance for database specific workloads, which is really key because you actually don't need as many resources if the storage is there to support you and give you that performance. So not only are we cheaper, we're trying to focus on letting you use fewer resources as well. I think that's not only something that we're doing to give value back, but I think something ethically we all believe here in Civo, that we're in this world, limited resources, and if we can do something as a cloud provider to make everyone use less energy, then it's really key and really something that we should be putting forward. And that's really part of the transparency that we give. One of the cool things that we did recently, I think it was about a year ago, is when we deployed our latest region, we actually had a video of behind the scenes of building our cloud. And that's what the video that we're going to show next is. And I'll explain some of the technology afterwards. If we get that running and see if we get some sound on it.
Were you able to hear the sound?
I wasn't. It's all right. I'll talk through the video if you just full screen it. So what we're doing is we're building our cloud with open compute technology, which is what this video is showing. So this is a project that was started by Microsoft and Google and Facebook to unify what hardware can be put in data centers. So rather than your standard 1U servers that you see in data centers, what we're doing is we're building these little modules and that they're sliding into the almost cubby holes of the racks that we've got there. I think this video is skipping. Is it skipping for everyone else? Yeah. I'll go over it then. So yeah, we get all of the parts shipped in, and some of the benefits of the open compute is on the power efficiency. So one thing you will notice on these is there is no power supplies in each of the compute servers, each of the servers. There's actually a centralized power that runs through the rack, which means that we get some really good efficiencies on power consumption with that centralized power distribution. One of the other benefits as well is on the mean time to failures. We actually see, if you do industry research, that power supplies are the one things that go in servers most often. So while the rest of the compute server is absolutely running fine, when power fails, you've got to replace that whole unit. But the way with open compute and what we've deployed, it means that we're disaggregating those. So while a power supply might fail, the rest of the board will keep on running. The density we get out of these is also great. So that's a 52U rack, and the number of servers that we can get into that is amazing. We get these built off-site for us and shipped, as you can see here, fully built and fully manufactured in a rack and get sent off to the data center. So we don't need staff on site. We get this all built off-site, we get it shipped to the data center, and we choose the data centers really selectively, not only for their green credentials, as I've covered before, but also on the ability for them to support these large, heavy racks. So again, this rack has arrived on site at the data center, and there are no Civo staff there, which is really, really cool, really, really interesting. So the racks get rolled, they come on wheels, they get rolled all the way into the lift, into the data center floor, and unplugged in. I don't envy the people having to move it, but they seem to be doing all right. So once the rack is in place, it just slides in alongside the rest of the racks that we've got. And then they'll go in, they'll plug it up to power, they'll plug up network connectivity. And because we've built this with this idea from the ground up, all of the servers here are completely unprovisioned. And we have got this set up that we will do a remote build on this. And within an hour of that rack arriving on the floor in the data center, it's ready in our public cloud to deliver services. And we can make sure that's done really securely over there. If you go on to the next slide. So I've covered a lot of those points there. So again, we're really focused on delivering Kubernetes. We're currently out in 4 locations, which is West Coast and East Coast in America. We've got a region in London and in Frankfurt. And I just wanted to leave you, before handing over to Mark, on just a kind of overview of those core services that we're offering. So there is the Kubernetes service that we've got. And that's really where our focus is. And our vision with our Kubernetes service is that it allows you to, it allows you to have your workload deployed either on Civo and then have the ability to move it to another cloud provider, or vice versa. So it's a really compliant way of using Kubernetes with us. If you do have legacy workloads, you are able to run just just compute services. And we've got databases, so the managed databases that you can host off cluster. We've got the ability for you to add storage on, either through like EBS equivalent volumes or object storage. And we've got the load balancing in front to make sure that as you distribute your workload across either compute or Kubernetes, you can spread that workload to give you some fault tolerance. We are looking now into the machine learning space. I think this is one of the most interesting areas. Well, I think the last two, this edge and the machine learning, are where I think there's some real growth at the moment. We've heard of ChatGPT. It's taken, 4 weeks, I think ChatGPT's out, but it feels like it's absolutely stolen all of the news cycles. So I think that's going to bring lots more people into a machine learning space. And what we want to do with our product is really challenge how that's being consumed at the moment. So it feels like all of the other tools that are out there, you've got to really understand it and have been working in that industry for a long time. And our product offering, same with everything else, is to really simplify and bring the user experience that's easy to use, but also the price points as low as possible to give that barrier of entry so that everyone can start using machine learning. And the other area that we're innovating in is on edge. So the technology that we have used to deploy our public cloud is something that we can also deliver to customers privately on their own premises. So depending on, you may not need a full rack or 10 racks, you would be able to get a half rack or quarter rack that we'll be able to push out into a private deployment for you. And then we're looking on how we manage other devices that are in your private location. So if you're looking at IoT devices, be they cameras or sensors or robots in manufacturing, we're looking at ways on how you can tie those into that private deployment or into a public cloud and get the value of Kubernetes across the entire deployment space. I think hand over to Mark now for a few closing thoughts.
Thank you, Dinesh. Yes, just to summarize then, I think Dinesh covered this a little bit, but I think when you look at what Civo is doing and I want to kind of throw some other smaller providers in there, and I just really want people to think about not always going hyperscaler first, because I think there's some real benefits to what companies like Civo are doing, how we're innovating, how we're trying to reduce cost, how we're trying to reduce complexity. And I think what you get from Civo, you can go to hyperscalers and use tools like Kubecost. You can You can put in great FinOps practices within your team and train all the team, but that's going to take a long time. And then you're going to have to keep an eye on all these tools and things and manage those and take into account all the optimizations that you have to then do. But with Civo, as Dinesh mentioned, we're straight out the gate, we're competitive. So I think really what we're trying to do is help companies reduce that cost, but also improve the performance and the really efficiency of development through a better development experience. And some of the ways we're doing that as well is to make sure with things like egress fees, there's no surprise charges. And for companies that are even interested to leave a hyperscaler, there is a big lock-in in terms of the egress charges you'll have to pay to leave them. And one of the initiatives that we're launching is that we'll actually pay your egress fees. So that becomes not a blocker. And I think I showed on one of my previous slides that that was a reason that a lot of companies felt locked in and couldn't leave their hyperscale provider. So Civo will actually cover those egress fees up to a certain limit. So we can't guarantee if it's multi-millions of pounds, but certainly we would provide those as free credits, so you're not kind of charged to leave your current provider. When you do use Civo, we include all the data transfer with the actual nodes. They have very generous data transfer allocations allocated to the nodes themselves. So you're not getting these surprise egress fees on top. And even if we did have to charge egress fees, our charge is I think about 1/10 or maybe even more than the hyperscale providers. But it's very rare that people bump into that because of the generous amounts we include with our nodes. And then when it comes to things like enterprise support, we don't charge extra. I think I mentioned that before. But I think it's 10K a month starting point with AWS, or a proportion of your bill with them, whichever is the larger. So it can actually grow to a lot more than that. Enhanced SLAs I touched on, that I feel like providers like Civo can offer a better SLA for you, more generous. If there was a problem or something, we do go further and we do pay out costs that are higher than the hyperscalers. Not that we have problems, they're rare, but obviously you've got that peace of mind in the SLA should the issues occur. And we do still offer bigger discounts. That if people were interested in providing a revenue commitment, then we can provide large discounts. But going back to what I mentioned before, our prices are good out the gate, so it doesn't mean that you have to do a large revenue commitment to get a big discount. And then finally, I think is a really important point, at a time when everyone else is putting their prices up, Civo has made a price commitment not to increase our prices in 2023. So you're going to get that certainty with Civo as a provider. And I just wanted to kind of finish up on one final thought, because some people maybe on this webinar may have come across this, but David Hansen, he's the co-founder of 37 Signals. And if you're not aware of 37 Signals, they created Ruby on Rails. Basecamp is a fairly well-known sort of project management system that kind of started for developers and people to manage their all their projects, and that's very well known. So they operate that as well. And then Hey.com as well, which is like a free email account service, as competitor to Gmails and people. They're very well known, and David's very well known in the kind of tech industry. And he posted in October about the fact that he was using various different cloud providers, I think mostly AWS, and they're leaving the cloud and they're going to take things back to the data center and host things themselves. As the quote says below, it says that they were highly optimized in their spend. They believe they went through a vigilant cost inspection program. They were tracking and using the tools, maybe some of the ones that Saiyam mentioned. They'd entered into long-term agreements to get the best pricing and reserving instances and things. So they had a highly optimized budget, but they were still spending 3 million. They spent over 3 million in 2022. And I think when you look at hyperscale profits, I think Amazon for the last financial year had a revenue of 62 billion, and they made an 18 billion profit after, you know, all of the operating costs and things. That's an operating profit of 18 billion. It shows you how much has been built in, you know, to the costs, all the various different surprise costs, egress charges, and things like that. These hyperscalers are working to massive margins, and that's why providers like Civo are able to, you know, cut costs quite a lot. But I think it was kind of for me, when I saw this, it's kind of like a sad day, because, you know, providers like Civo, you know, we're working really hard to reduce costs, provide transparent pricing. And then really you've got companies such as this that are thinking about completely coming off cloud. But at the same time, they're going to lose all the benefits of what cloud promised us, which is all this, you know, instant access to resources. So if you're a startup, you're able to get going straight away. You don't have to order servers and wait for them to be delivered. You don't have to go and take them to the data center, install them and patch them and all that kind of stuff. That's all taken care of. If you're a company that's scaling really fast, you have access to resources quickly to scale. So there's huge benefits to cloud, and things like fault tolerance and various other things, and patching. You don't have to worry about the network layers and the, you know, the infrastructure layers that's taken care of. So I think at Civo, what we're really that halfway house where companies like this shouldn't be necessarily looking to come completely off the cloud. But is there a solution in the middle somewhere that's cost effective and provides the performance and all the benefits of a big hyperscaler, but without that huge price tag? And that's really where we're trying to challenge the status quo of hyperscale providers. So I'll just leave you on that kind of final thought, really. But you know, it's an interesting time with what's going on at the moment, and I think some of the hyperscale providers, I could probably find it quite challenging over the next 12 months. Given the companies are starting to really look at cost.